So a couple weeks ago, I made a video where I created some brand new Paradox Pokemon for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and thought about the idea of what it would be like if we got some more Paradox Pokemon in these games. And you guys really enjoyed that video and showed it a lot of love, which I really appreciate, so I decided today that I would go ahead and do it again. Just like last time, in this video, we are going to be asking and answering the question of what it would be like if more Paradox Pokemon were in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. We're going to be looking at 3 Paradox forms in particular that I have created myself with the help of my good friend Oscar Belmonte, who has done the artwork for these designs, and I highly recommend checking him out in the description because he does amazing work. I'd also like to just give you guys some advance notice really quick, but if you haven't been able to tell already by the sound of my voice, I am a little slightly under the weather, so that might affect how I sound in this video. I'm sorry, I'll try and make up for it by giving you guys some amazing new Paradox forms. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into it. Alrighty, so in the first video on this topic, I made 2 future Paradox form Pokemon and 1 past Paradox Pokemon. In this video, I have decided as such to flip that and make 2 past forms and 1 future form. And the first past form I want to focus on here is a past Paradox form of none other than Garchomp. Not only is Garchomp a pseudo-legendary, but it is also one of the coolest and most popular Pokemon of all time, so it getting a past form would be amazing just based on that alone. But it actually has a really good reason as to why it could legitimately get a past form as well. You see, Garchomp is based on a shark, but it also walks on land. That is why its pre-evolution Gible is literally known as the land shark Pokemon. Additionally, fans have pointed out a ton of similarities between Garchomp and the actual shark Pokemon, Sharpedo, to the point where it seems like, canonically, that these Pokemon are probably related to one another in some way. So, with all of these factors in mind, I thought it would be really cool to create a version of Garchomp that is a little closer on the evolutionary chain to its potential relative Sharpedo, and is a form from when it actually did reside in the water and before it transitioned to living fully on land. And that is what resulted in my past form of Garchomp. Now, this form of Garchomp, since it does reside a little more often in the water, is a dragon water type instead of dragon ground type. And as a part water type that does reside more often in the water, the fins on its body have been enhanced and enlarged for use in the actual water, and the idea is that over time, once it eventually made its way onto land and settled there permanently, that it evolved accordingly, and these giant fins that it has in this past form eventually shrunk and started to fade away once it began to eventually transition to its modern day land form. And these giant fins are also what gave this version of Garchomp its name, or rather its code name, as it is known as Draconic Fin. Draconic Fin was an apex predator in the areas where it once lived, and in addition to its giant fins that help to differentiate it from regular Garchomp, another difference between the two that you may have noticed is in the coloration of Draconic Fin, and this is actually in reference to the beta design of Garchomp that was leaked to the public on the internet a couple years ago. As a literal past form of Garchomp, this made for a nice nod in this past-oriented design, and being able to reference both its actual development past as well as its in-game lore past in one design is really cool in my opinion, and I think this would make for an amazing inclusion into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So if we end up getting more Paradox forms in future DLC, this is exactly the kind of thing that I personally would like to see. And speaking of Paradox Pokemon that I would really like to see in these games if we ever did actually get more, for my next pick and feature of the video, I have none other than Cyndaquil. Now this one is obviously an extremely biased pick because Cyndaquil is my favorite Pokemon of all time, but as my favorite Pokemon of all time, and also a starter Pokemon as well, I thought it would be absolutely fascinating to see what Cyndaquil could look like as a Paradox Pokemon, and it is actually going to be our designated future form Pokemon of the video, and it looks a little something like this. Now, I gotta tell you guys, if something like this ever actually happened in-game, I would probably have some kind of aneurysm, because it looks absolutely incredible. I wasn't kidding around when I told you my man Oscar Belmonte does amazing work, but basically what I wanted to do with this particular form of Cyndaquil is, first of all, make it a pure electric type, and essentially replace the flames that it spits out of its back with electricity, which was a pretty straightforward trade-off that I felt like made Cyndaquil a really good candidate for a future form. However, I also wanted to approach this particular future form a little bit differently, because the thing about the future Paradox Pokemon is that they're all basically just robots, and I wanted to give this design a little bit of a shakeup so it didn't just have to be a robot as well. And the way that I decided to do that without it entirely breaking the rules of the future Paradox Pokemon is to essentially model it after the design of Rideon. Rideon is also considered a Paradox Pokemon just like all of the other future forms, however, its design comparatively is a little bit more varied in terms of what it has to offer. I can't really say it looks a little bit more natural or organic, but it's got more variance to its various features instead of just literally being a robot. I think if you take a look at Rideon and compare it to any of the other future Paradox Pokemon, you can kinda see what I'm getting at. So essentially, I just wanted to inject some of that Rideon design energy into this Cyndaquil future form so it could be a future form, but also not just be a plain old robot. And I think that concept turned out really good, if I do say so myself. The name I have decided to give this version of Cyndaquil is also pretty straightforward too. It is simply Iron Quills, because I think that just makes the most sense for a Paradox form of Cyndaquil. And while we haven't really had any starter Pokemon get a Paradox form yet, I feel like with this design, Cyndaquil has definitely put himself at the top of the list in terms of being a Pokemon that should get that honor. It's probably not one that is ever going to happen, but it clearly would be pretty cool, at least in my opinion anyway, if it did. Moving along though, for our third Paradox Pokemon of the video, we are going to go back to the past forms as previously stated, and give a past form to none other than Rideon. Now, this Paradox Pokemon is going to be a little bit more unique compared to the other ones I've created so far, because there is a very specific reason as to why I've decided to give Rideon a Paradox form, and there is a very specific inspiration behind Paradox Rideon's design. Before we go any further though, let's go ahead and actually show you what this Paradox form of Rideon actually looks like. This is Origin Horn. Now, as mentioned, Origin Horn looks a little bit different compared to its base form than a lot of the other Paradox Pokemon, including the ones that I have created. However, there is a really specific reason for this. I'm sure many of you are aware of this already, but Rideon was the very first Pokemon ever created, and this fact alone, I thought, made Rideon a prime candidate to be able to receive a really cool Paradox past form of itself that pays homage to this. So, rather than having the design of this Paradox Pokemon be based primarily on Rideon itself, the design of Origin Horn is actually partly inspired by Rideon's original design, from when it was indeed the very first Pokemon and was included in the initial concept pitch for Pokemon back when it was known as Capsule Monsters. From these original pitch documents, we've received a glimpse at what Rideon used to look like back when it was a brand new design. And in order to once again pay homage to Rideon as the very first Pokemon ever, I decided to base its past Paradox form on this design while still keeping some of the elements from the modern design in order to tie the two together and still have it be recognizable. This inspiration is also why I have given the normal type to Origin Horn, as the normal type sort of represents a clean slate, if you will, which Game Freak were working with at the time that Rideon was created when Pokemon had literally ceased to exist, and they were building it from the ground up. Also, very fittingly, this would have been at a time when the concept of Pokemon types hadn't even been created yet, because we know those came a little later on in development, so I feel like giving it a type like Normal is really symbolic of all of this. And with so much focus being put on the concept of the past in these games, I think it would be really cool to not only highlight the past in terms of the lore of the Pokemon world, but also the past in terms of the actual development of Pokemon as a franchise. And I feel like something like this would be a great nod to where it all started. However, those are just some of my ideas of what I think it could be like if we did get more Paradox Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. But now I want to know what you guys think. Do you like these ideas? Do you have any other ideas for other Paradox Pokemon yourself? Be sure to let me know all of those ideas and thoughts in the comments below, and leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more if you're new, because it helps out a lot and is greatly appreciated. If you'd like to help support the making of videos just like this as well, be sure to check out my Pokemon remixes on Spotify as well as other music streaming services. Listening to my remixes on any of these music streaming platforms directly supports the channel right back here on YouTube a ton, and it is one of the easiest ways outside of watching videos to directly support the channel. So if you haven't checked out my remixes yet, I would highly appreciate you even considering doing so, because it's an immensely easy way to immensely support the channel. With that said though, I will be back with another video right here on YouTube very soon, and until then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.